Welcome back to another episode after week one of the NFL season. We're a lot happened in week one, to be honest. A lot of good games. A lot of games came down to close finishes. Couple blowouts for sure, but most of the games were pretty competitive. Came down to field goals or overtime or clutch plays late in the game. There's a couple I do want to touch on, kind of go more into detail about them, just in terms of the games that happened, the teams that were involved, and of course we'll go over my picks from week one. And actually, we'll start with my picks from week one. So obviously, I gave 5 games week one. Go off the spread. Choose underdogs or choose favorites. Just a reminder, my picks was Bills Rams -2.5 Buffalo, Niners Bears -6.5 San Francisco, Steelers Bengals +6.5 Pittsburgh, Jags and Commanders +2.5 Jacksonville, and then Chiefs Cardinals -6 Kansas City. So starting with Bills Rams, like I said, 2.5 for Buffalo. They won 31-10. Obviously, that looked at halftime. That game was 10-10. But then obviously, as the second half came around, the Bills proved why they are the favorite in the AFC. And like I said in my week one video, I do have them representing the AFC in the Super Bowl and most likely winning the Super Bowl as well. Niners Bears. Weird game. This is another game I'll go into detail about along with the Bills and Rams game, but raining the entire game. The field was soaking wet. Weird, just a really weird start for I know Trey Lance had a couple starts last year, but with him being the true starter of the 49ers, definitely not the right environment that you wanted him to be in to start a game like this, and it proved. They only scored 10 points. They lost 19-10 to the Bears. Again, the Bears are one of the worst teams in the league, so obviously that bet did not hit, but definitely a surprising game from San Francisco's side. Next one, Steelers Bengals, great game. The Steelers, I basically said this. I said that week one, it seemed to always come out a lot better. They beat Buffalo last year on the road. They beat Cincinnati on the road this year. I said the defense would show out. The defense had 4 interceptions and a forced fumble of Joe Burrow and the reigning AFC champions from a year ago. And they won the game. Like I said, weird game. It's another one I'll get into as well. But, missed field goals down the stretch that could have won the game, blocked extra points. And then obviously it turned out the Steelers did win on a game-winning field goal in overtime. So they get the win 23-20. Obviously they covered by winning the game. I'm 2-1 so far. It's still 2 more games left. Jags at Washington. Like I said, the line was +2.5 Jacksonville. I felt confident about Jacksonville, and I thought they played pretty decent. I thought Lawrence looked a lot better. I thought that having Doug Peterson as your head coach, you're going to get more stability in that locker room and on that team. And I thought he looked more like a pro quarterback than he did last year. And I know you have another year under your belt, another training camp, another OTAs, and more preseason. But I think he looked a lot better. And even though they didn't win the game, they did wind up losing 28-22. Again, another game that came right down to the wire. Washington went down, scored a touchdown with only 1 minute and 46 seconds left. Jaguars had a chance. It seemed like they were moving the ball a little bit towards that final drive, but then it kind of stalled, and then Lawrence threw a pick to seal it. So Washington did win 28-22. But you know what? If you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, though, I think you feel a lot more confident about your team going into the rest of the season because they at least showed you something. Now, Washington isn't one of the best teams in the league, for sure. They're probably at best somewhere in that 15 to 18 range, but again, they're for sure, that's at best. Obviously, they're probably somewhere in that 20 to 25 range, to be honest. Maybe they surprise a little bit, I'm not sure, but I don't really love them, to be honest. But I think you feel confident. I think that in a weaker division, for sure, as when we run through the scores in the other games, you'll see that. But I think you can see the momentum starting to come. And I think if Lawrence can just continue to grow in that offense, and like I said, I think Peterson's a great coach for that. As we saw with Wentz in 2017, when he probably would have won the MVP that year if he didn't get injured. I'm not saying obviously Lawrence will be like that, but I think that Lawrence will be a lot better of a quarterback this year. I think as long as the mistakes go down, which you would hope that they would. Again, only the 1 interception in that game, and that was the last real play of that game. when he kind of just chucked it deep, to be honest. I don't think he had to do that. I was watching that live. It seemed like he didn't really have to do that, but he decided to do it. But again, that was the only mistake he really made throughout the game. And they had so many chances to score in that game. They were down with the goal line. They had a wide open touchdown from ETN that he dropped. They had a couple other chances where they were right there. They probably should have got at least 10 points, probably even 14 points, to be honest. So that was unfortunate for sure. But again, I think you see the momentum and you see the pattern that they're going into the rest of the season. And then the last pick, Chiefs at Cardinals, -6. I told you this would be, the Chiefs would easily dominate this game. That's exactly what happened. 44-21. Mahomes put up 5 touchdowns. It looked like an easy game, to be honest. The Cardinals aren't good. I've been saying this, and they're, all the starts that they've had the last couple of years, and, they were undefeated last year, and they were, they were like 10-4 one year, and then, or 9-4 one year, and then they obviously collapsed towards the end. This year is not going to be like that. They're just going to be bad throughout the season. Kingsbury's going to get fired, whether it's halfway through the season or the end of the season. He'll be gone. Murray, I know he just signed the extension, but huge questions with him, to be honest. I know Hopkins isn't playing, and they had a couple guys on defense not there, but they're just not a good team. I just don't see how this team could even win 6 games, to be honest. Maybe they get to 6 or 7, but I don't think they're that good of a team. And Murray, he's not a top 10 quarterback. He's a top 13 quarterback, I would say. Maybe at times he could play like a top 10 quarterback, but he's just not there for me. And I was a big Murray guy before, but just the way he's played recently, the attitude, the off the field stuff, it doesn't fit right with being a franchise quarterback. And it's, like I said, they had to give him that contract. You have to do that when you do have, a potential franchise quarterback guy. But I don't like this team at all. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFC. There are some bad teams in the NFC, but for the at least talent that they do have, I think they'll be one of the worst teams based just strictly on their talent. Because there are teams in the NFC that are going to be worse than them, but those teams aren't as good, at least on paper, as Arizona. And this Week 1 performance, I think some people are probably thinking maybe they could surprise Kansas City. Kansas City lost Tyreek Hill. Maybe they're not as good as they were before. Like I said, I never bought into that. I always had Kansas City making the playoffs. Maybe they wouldn't win the AFC West, which I didn't pick them to. Maybe they wouldn't go back to an AFC Championship game, which I don't think they will, but maybe. But Week 1, Mahomes in September, Mahomes in Week 1, his stats are unbelievable. I never even worried about this game. It was over right as soon as the Chiefs basically got the ball. It was kind of over, to be honest. And again, that's exactly what happened. So Week 1, I went 3-2. Not bad. As long as you go 3-2, obviously you're winning every single week. So definitely can't complain about that. And I think my most confident picks, I guess my most confident one, I guess I would say, was Niners Bears. I think maybe if it was a sunny day, maybe that changes things, but whatever, that's the past. So we'll see what happens moving forward. But those are the Week 1 picks. My Week 2 picks will be in the next video when we preview Week 2, which will be out in a couple days, probably Friday, maybe Saturday. Those picks will come out. But like I said, starting the season off 3-2 is never a bad thing. You're over 500, so not going to complain. But we will go into, like I said, there was a couple games I really wanted to detail. And we'll start with the first game of the season, the Bills-Rams. So, like I said, it was 10-10 at halftime. At least seemed, there was a lot of mistakes from the Bills in the first half. Allen had his two interceptions in the first half. They had a fumble as well. Rams made some mistakes as well, but the way that the Bills kind of seemed like they were moving the ball and the way that it's, just like their offense and their defense. They have a really good defense, top 5. And obviously you have Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, another great game from him. He's going to be he's probably like the most underrated receiver in the league, I would say. Just in terms of guys who, don't have the name recognition. Obviously, he had the 4 touchdown game last year, but in terms of just name recognition, he's one of the best guys in the league who not many people know about. And I think they'll start knowing about him this year because Diggs is going to see a lot of double coverage. But, at some point in the season, though, if Davis is going to emerge and be like that second guy, like we saw with Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster a couple years ago, like you can't just keep doubling Diggs because then Davis will be wide open, and then that opens up their offense even more. So a lot of teams facing the Bills down the road are going to have a lot of problems, and that's why it's obviously such an easy pick to have them go down the AFC because there's too many weapons on that offense, and you have arguably the best quarterback in the league. But just going to that game, I kind of want to touch on the Rams. I already talked about the Bills a little bit. This is kind of what worried me with the Rams. I still think they're one of the better teams in the NFC. And as we saw through week one, some of the best teams in the NFC that we thought were going to be at the top didn't really look that good in week one. And I think I think it's definitely more open than we possibly thought it was going into the season. But that defense, I know they got Wagner. They still have Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, but they did not look good at all. And I think we saw the big absence on that defense was Von Miller. And I know Floyd's a good pass rusher, but he's not a Hall of Famer like Von Miller, who really found his legs and really found just like a spark to his, kind of career. Because he was still a good player at the end of Denver, but he was getting injured. He wasn't as dominant as he was. And obviously playing with Donald, for sure helps. But, he was arguably one of the most important pieces on that team last year, ever since they got him from Denver. And with his absence now being on the Bills as well, he made a big sack on Stafford. But that's going to prove crucial, I think, on that defensive line because Donald's great. He did have a good game in this one, but if you don't have that edge rusher coming off and really applying pressure when Donald's going to get double and triple teamed, you need Floyd to be that guy. And I don't think he is that guy. He's solid. He's going to probably get 10 sacks around there, but he's not going to be a dominant force like for you and your team like Von Miller could be. Or at least you got to worry about that guy. I don't think you're really worrying about Leonard Floyd. I think he's there for sure. But you're not like focusing your offensive line to kind of shift that way. You can kind of leave your tackle on an island. You could at least chip someone with a running back or a tight end a little bit, maybe sometimes if he is getting hot. But again, it's not someone you really have to worry about. And then and another thing about this defense is Ramsey. I mean, he obviously just didn't look good. I mean, Diggs, I can't remember exactly what the stats were, but Diggs just in the game, he wasn't covering Diggs the whole game, but Diggs did go for 8 for 122 and the one touchdown that he had, which was over Jalen Ramsey. So that's going to be a little question mark as well. I don't think that secondary is as good as it's been the last couple years. Obviously, it's been anchored by Ramsey, but they do definitely have questions on that defense, which was always a top 10 defense for sure at the worst. It's going to have to play like top 5 defense this year because I think they just have a lot of questions. I think on offense, Kupp is still amazing. He went for 13 for 128 and a touchdown, but I think the loss of Odell really hurts that team. They need that down the field threat that he provided. Now, is Odell as fast as he was when he was at the Giants? No, and especially after coming off another torn ACL, he definitely won't be, but he fits so well in that offense. That's like the perfect offense for him where there's constant motion, there's moving pieces. He's not the number one guy. He can go down the field. Obviously, Stafford has a big arm as well. He's going to be open because of the scheme and the formation that they run. So I think bringing Allen Robinson, who I've always liked, I just don't know if he fits that offense exactly the way that they run it. He's more of like a 50-50 guy. He's going to make tough catches. He's going to, in traffic, he's going to come down with the ball most of the time. That's just not the way they play their offense. It's spacing, it's guys being open, finding soft spots in zones, misdirection to get open in man, and he's just not that guy. So I wouldn't be surprised if Odell signs with them when he proves that he's healthy from the ACL, which again, it was in the Super Bowl, so it's not like it happened in November, December, where he would probably be back in a week or two. He's probably not going to be back until, I don't know, maybe another month, 2 months, I would say. He probably won't be back, so I would assume that they would sign him. Again, he fits there. He obviously was there last year. I think he likes it there as well. But I think that's a big factor for them having him. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, I think the Rams are still one of the better teams in the NFC. I think their division can help with Seattle and Arizona. You can probably, out of those 4 games, you should be able to win at least 3 of them. They're always good against Arizona, so maybe even 4. And Seattle, I'll actually touch on them a little bit later, but they're not that good of a team. Even though they did win week one, they're not that good of a team, to be honest. LA should be able to beat them twice. So we'll see what happens, but definitely maybe a little concerning if you're a Rams fan, just a little bit. Not so much in terms of regular season, but if you want to get back to a Super Bowl and win another one, there's definitely some holes on that team that do need to be fixed. And I know it's only week one overreactions, but I don't really know if that's an overreaction. I think that there are for sure holes on that team. The next game I wanted to talk about, Niners Bears. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like I said, the rain really impacted that game. Lance, I mean, if you watch that game, people were sliding all over the field. You couldn't even snap the ball without it falling out of your hands. You couldn't really throw the ball because of the rain, obviously, pounding down on the ball. Kittle didn't play as well. I think he would have been a big factor because you can kind of just give him the ball, 5 yards down the field and let him make a play. And Elijah Mitchell got injured as well. He's actually out for a couple weeks. So I think they just got a couple injuries that didn't help. I think the environment didn't help. And it just wasn't a great debut for Lance. I'm still big on Lance. Like I said, I had the Niners coming out of the NFC and going to the Super Bowl. I think they will figure it out. The defense played great for the first half. I mean, the Bears were scoreless, and then they got one touchdown, which was like a broken play. It kind of Fields was just scrambling in the pocket and then just threw it across his body, and a guy was just wide open. And they got I think it was like a 50-yard touchdown or something like that. Yeah, 51-yard touchdown. So it was kind of just like a broken play that happened. And then they added 2 more touchdowns as well, but I'm not exactly worried about the Niners. I think a lot of people after that game happened, because again, Jimmy G is still the backup there. He didn't get traded. He probably won't get traded. So there's always going to be questions about should you put Jimmy G back in. The stat with Shanahan, what is he, 11-30 or something, or 8-30 with with quarterbacks not named Jimmy G since he got to San Francisco. Whatever the stat exactly is, it's just and then he's obviously has a great winning percentage with Jimmy G as their quarterback. So that they're always going to throw that out every time Lance has a bad game or the Niners lose to a team that they should have beat. Even if Lance played a great game, they'd probably still say that. But I'm not worried about them yet. I can't say that because their defense is still really good. I think that Lance, once you get that running game going, I think that opens up the offense a lot. Debo had a 6-yard touchdown run. Obviously, he's going to be great again. Like I said, Kittle didn't play. Losing Mitchell hurts, but they always seem to have a running back on that team that can, if you think of Mostert, he was on there. Elijah Mitchell, Wilson. They always have guys who come in and out of there and then just go on a tear for 5-6 games and then usually get injured. But then they find someone else. So I'm not worried about them. I think they'll be fine. Not a great way to start your season, losing to the Bears, who will probably only win, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 games. I guess this helps because you're already starting off with 1, but they probably won't win more than 4 games, I would say, the rest of the way. But that was like I said, I'm just not totally. I'm not going to, go crazy on the Niners right now. And now if it continues and the offense doesn't look great, like I said, if it's sunny, you're in San Francisco, I think it'll be a lot better. But if the offense continues not to look great and it's maybe week 6, week 7, then you start to worry. And maybe you start to think, what happens if, with Lance obviously not playing well. We'll see. That's way down the road. That's not for another month or 2. So we won't have to worry about that for a little bit. But the next game, again, going down kind of my bets that I had, which, all turned out to be pretty good games. But Steelers-Bengals, like I said, Steelers won 23-20 on a game-winning field goal in OT. Really good game, and just because you could see why people are high on the Steelers. Maybe not high in terms of, making a serious push in the playoffs, but can actually be a playoff team in a really tough division. You could just see the defense. Now, the one thing that's going to hurt that is that TJ Watt has a torn pec, and he's rather going to be out for the season or he's going to miss 6 weeks. It depends on if he gets surgery or not. So if he gets surgery, then he's done for the year, which that puts a big, that just hurts their defense so much because he's obviously reigning defensive player of the year. He'd rather win it this year or be second or third, and he'd probably get 17 plus sacks. And obviously, again, that's a guy you got to double team. You got to think about on the edge. So losing him, even if it's for 6 weeks, that could really hurt because obviously the offense still isn't great. They only put up 23 points. They weren't like moving the ball. Najee Harris is already injured. He said he's going to play next week, but he's already injured. That's not great, especially when you don't have an amazing offensive line and you really need that running game with Trubisky as your quarterback. To just open that offense up. Because again, you do have good wide receivers on the outside. You have a decent tight end in Pat Freiermuth, but you really need the running game to start things off. And Najee's he's a great running back in terms of just always getting extra yards, always being able to slip tackles and get away from guys. So if he's not fully healthy and he can't really do the things that he does, the best, that's going to cause problems for your offense, which that just puts a way more pressure on your defense. And if you don't have TJ Watt, that's even more pressure on your defense because, again, you're losing a top 5 player in the league in week 1. So we'll see what happens. I haven't seen anything exactly yet, if it is 6 weeks or the whole season. But that's big news either way. And I would say probably he's going to miss the whole season. Again, even if he only misses 6, he's never going to be fully healthy the rest of the way, so we'll see what he looks like when he comes back. But again, I don't know that yet. That'll come out later today as I'm recording this. So by the time next episode comes out, we will know if he's out for the season or not. But I do want to talk about Trubisky a little bit. I thought he played pretty decent. Like I said, I think the lack of a running game did hurt. Their leading rusher was Chase Claypool, and obviously he's not even a running back, so again, that's the biggest thing for them. If they have a running game, I think their offense can at least be good enough to move the ball down the field. They have a decent kicker in Boswell. I think they can get points down the field. And as long as Trubisky could just stay in his own lane and just do what he needs to do and get time in the pocket, obviously he can escape and run as well. I think they're going to be decent on offense. But again, losing TJ Watt's really going to hurt them. Because again, I kind of like the Steelers too. I know some people who really liked them and thought they would make the playoffs. I think they would fight for a playoff spot, but we'll have to see what happens the rest of the way now. But switching to the Bengals, definitely not the way you want it to start the season. Burrow did not look good. He had 4 picks and again, lost fumble as well. I think he got sacked 7 or 8 times, got hit another 7 or 8 times as well. So that offensive line that they went out, They signed guys. They got Alex Kappa from the Bucs. They got La'el Collins from the Cowboys. You thought that the offensive line would be shored up, especially after last season when he had to go through. In week 1, it for sure wasn't. And that's a problem because that's really the one area that they needed to be fixed on the offense. Because again, you have the wide receivers, you have the quarterback, you have the running back. You needed the offensive line to be just good enough, where he's not getting hit 15 times a game. And getting pressured all this time, having to escape the pocket, make bad decisions, make mistakes. So if that's going to continue, last year I think they obviously weren't one of the best teams going into the playoffs. They finished the year 10-7, but when the playoffs came, that's really when they played a lot better. I don't know if they're exactly that team, like a Super Bowl-esque team, this year. Even before this week, I didn't really think of them like that. I think they kind of just caught fire, and that's really what you need when it comes to the playoffs in the NFL. You got to catch fire, but if they want a chance to go back to the Super Bowl or at least compete to get to an AFC Championship game and possibly, beat the Bills or the Chiefs or the Chargers, whoever, you need the offensive line to play better because the defense is at least good enough to the point where you may have to worry about them sometimes, maybe against a Herbert or a Josh Allen. That could be a problem. But for the most part, the defense should be good enough. But the offensive line is where you need those guys to kind of step up. You got, again, Kappa and Collins, and you already had a couple guys on that line that were okay, decent. But you really need them to step up now because Burrow can't be getting hit that many times. He can't be having 4 picks. Obviously, the picks are on him because you can't be throwing the ball like that. But that's not a great start for them. They do get Dallas in week 2, which, I won't talk about the Dallas game in this video. I'll do it for the Cowboys main video where it's just talking about the Cowboys. But, obviously they lose Dak Prescott. They didn't look great in week 1. So that, you are at least getting a vulnerable team in week 2, even though you're on the road. So, and obviously they're going to have, their hair's going to be on fire going to that game because you can't start the year 0-2. Especially with the Ravens winning week 1. and they play Miami next week. Baltimore does. That's not an easy game, but it's also not a hard game. So if Baltimore's 2-0 and you're 0-2, that's not a great start, especially because Baltimore is going to continue to get healthier. They don't even have everyone back yet. And that's going to be a problem. So we'll see what happens with them next week, going to Dallas. But again, a little bit of concern for Cincinnati if you were super high on them, which I wasn't, but still a little bit concerned anyways. Quickly, I just want to say there was a tie in week 1, the Colts and the Texans. This really only matters more for the Colts, who have had these aspirations of possibly making some noise in the playoffs, and they have Matt Ryan as their quarterback now after, Wentz kind of just collapsed last year. They lose to the Jaguars in the last week of the season to miss the playoffs, even though they have Jonathan Taylor and a top 5 defense. And they tie the Texans in week 1, which again, the Texans will probably win, I don't know, 3 or 4 games this year. So that's not a good way to start the season. For some reason with the Colts, they can't beat the bad teams, especially in their division. I mean, the Jaguars and the Texans, they can't beat, or even if they do, it's like they're coming back at the last second to beat them. It's just weird. I don't know. They also looked awful. They're down 20-3 in this game. They really should have lost. The Texans kind of, fumbled the bag at the end, but man, that's not a good start to their season to go out of that game with a tie. It does help that no one else in the division won a game because the Titans did lose, and I will mention that right after this, and obviously the Jaguars lost as well, but you're really only looking at the Titans as a true competitor in that division. So I guess technically you are leading that division, but it's just weird that they can't beat bad teams, or they just really struggle with bad teams. I don't really understand it. But again, Taylor played great, but Ryan, I guess, played decent, but the offense couldn't go anywhere. They had 3 points going into the fourth quarter. They scored 17 in the fourth quarter to finally tie it, and then it seemed like they obviously they tried to score in overtime, but it came to a point where they kind of were just playing for the tie. The Texans they punted it. They punted it like midfield with I think it was less than a minute left in the game in overtime. Some people thought they should have went for it, but honestly at that point, if you don't get it, I think it was fourth and manageable, but if you don't get it, I'm not sure if the Colts had a timeout, but even still, you have 30 to 40 seconds and you need about 15 to 20 yards. At least give yourself a really good shot with probably a 50 to 50 yard field goal. I don't know if you take that risk, especially when you're the Texans. Obviously you should have won this game. You're up 20-3 in the fourth quarter, but you kind of want to get away with that with at least something. So I wouldn't really fault Lovie Smith for that. I know a lot of people did, but I can't really complain too much. If it was the other way around, it was the Colts who did that, I think you could complain all you want because you should go for that win there. You shouldn't want to play for a tie against the Texans. But so like I said, that was the first tie. We almost had 2 ties with obviously the Bengals and the Steelers. That game, the Bengals won in overtime, or the Steelers won in overtime, but there was only about a minute left on the clock, so that could have been a tie as well. But like I said, the Titans game I wanted to just quickly touch on. They lost to the Giants. The Giants look like awful, like a terrible team, like the team that they probably are for most of that game, and then they kind of got it going towards the end. Barkley had a great game. They go for 2 after getting a late touchdown. They get it. They're up 21-20. Titans at least have some time on the clock. They do get down the field, and they miss the field goal to obviously win the game with no time left. So big loss for the Titans. That's a game you got to win against. Again, that's one of the worst teams in the NFC. I don't really see them being. I think some people kind of have some hope for the Giants after this game. I kind of look at the Texans in this game and think they just lost it, to be honest. I don't think, obviously the Giants did what they had to do. They came back in the fourth. They did get the 2-point conversion, but I don't really think they did anything super impressive to make me think that they're going to win more games than I thought they were going to. So I look at the Titans in this one, especially with the Colts tying the Texans. Yeah, you got to win that game. Week 1 at home as well. That's a game you have to win. The Titans definitely aren't as good as they were last year, the year before that. But if you're not going to win your division, Yeah, like I said in the last video, you got to win at least 11 games, I think, to make the playoffs in the AFC. And you got to win week one against the Giants if you want to do that, if you're not going to win your division, which right now is obviously still a possibility that you don't. So that was definitely one of the more surprising games of the weekend, obviously, with the Giants beating the Titans in Tennessee. But again, I'm not expecting anything crazy from the Giants. I think the Titans will still be fine, obviously, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win 8 or 9 games this year. To be honest, I mean, I obviously again weak division, but they're not that good of a team. And if Henry's not going to go off every single game, they have no passing attack, and the defense is still good. But if you can't really move the ball on offense, if Henry can't, if Henry's not on, then what do they really have on offense? They have Tannehill, they have Robert Woods, they have Treylon Burks. I mean, come on, these aren't like good players, to be honest. Definitely a couple of problems and questions in Tennessee after week one, definitely. But the next game, I guess there's 2 more games I kind of want to talk about at least a little bit. Raiders Chargers. This was one of the more exciting matchups going into week one because both teams got big additions. Obviously, the Raiders getting Devontae Adams and Chandler Jones, and the Chargers getting Khalil Mack. They got J.C. Jackson. He didn't play in this game, but obviously they did get him. But Khalil Mack had a good game. I think he had 2 sacks in this game. Devontae Adams had a really good game. They did lose. The Chargers did win this game 24-19, but Adams, that shows you what a number one receiver does. Because as you see with the Raiders, even though they didn't win the game, he went for 10 catches, 141 yards, and a touchdown. And if you look at the Packers, obviously the team that he left and went to the Raiders, you look at their team, they scored 7 points against the Vikings and looked awful all day. Now, you could say that last year, week one against the Saints, they got blown out and they looked terrible, and then they ended up being the number 1 seed. But they don't have Devontae Adams. They don't have MVS. Their team's a little bit different. It's not the same. The offensive line is not as good as it was. They have a lot of questions there for obviously Green Bay. I'm talking about. So I don't really look at it like that. They got blown out again. It didn't look good. It looked ugly. It looked dysfunctional. They'll put it back on track for the rest of the season. I think they'll still be one of the better teams. Again, they are in a weaker division and they're in the NFC, but I don't see them being this 13-4 team, 12-5 team that's going to easily run away with that division and easily be one of the best teams in the NFC, unless they prove a lot to me, which they're going to have to do because it's not the same when you don't have Devontae Adams. And then like I said, it shows. I mean, you don't have a guy who can get open anytime he wants. There's only a handful of guys in the league who could do that. Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams. I think Tyreek Hill can be like that just because of his speed and quickness, but those route runner guys like Kupp and Adams, they can just get open whenever they want because they know that no matter what you throw at them, they know how to get by you, they know how to get open. So it just shows what a loss like a true number 1 wide receiver is to a team. And again, I think it's a great addition for the Raiders, even though they lost this game. I like I said, I think they're the 3rd best team in that division. But if the defense can pick it up a little bit and the offensive line can be better, and again, Carr, if you watch the game, you know that Carr wasn't great. He had 3 interceptions, seemed to be missing guys a lot, even though he only missed 15 passes. Obviously, 3 of those were picks. Just didn't seem like he was hitting guys exactly how you want, how you in stride, if you want, down the field a lot. So he's going to have to improve a lot. I said that in the last video. I said, he's going to have to play I think he is a top 10 quarterback, but he's going to have to prove that he's a top 10 quarterback because if he's not, then this team's not going to make the playoffs because the division's tough, the conference is tough, and there's better quarterbacks than him in the conference. And if he can't play like a top 10 quarterback and not go through these mistakes and these interceptions and these bad passes almost every single week, then they really don't have a shot of truly competing for a playoff spot. I think they can obviously compete. They'll still be there because they are talented. But if he's not going to play like the guy that they think he is, and most people think that he is, I don't see them. I don't see them making the playoffs, to be honest. But like I said, this game definitely a good game. It was close. The Chargers pulled away. The Raiders came back. Did have a chance to possibly do something towards the end, but then Carr got picked off on the final drive. But some encouraging stuff. Like I said, I think again having Adams as a number one, it just opens up your offense for Renfrow, for Waller, for Jacobs. So I'll be interesting to see what they look like in probably week 4 or 5. When you got more reps, you got more guys, you see how the offense really works. And like I said, I think the defense will be good enough. I think the turnovers are the big thing for that defense. If they're not forcing turnovers, then again, the defense isn't going to be that good because it's not that good. It's not that talented. So they really need to be forcing turnovers to really make an impact on the defensive side, which will obviously help the offensive side as well. Not much to say about the Chargers. They kind of did what I expected them to do. Herbert was amazing. I think we'll see what happens when J.C. Jackson comes back. What that defense can look like at full strength. But I picked them to win the AFC West. I think they will win the AFC West. Big matchup this week: Chargers at Chiefs, Thursday Night Football. They always play really good games against each other, and now they're probably on the most equal level playing field they've been on in a couple years. Even though the Chargers always play them tough, they've always been the worst team than Kansas City. But you could argue that the Chargers are the better team than Kansas City. So it'll be interesting to see how they do match up against each other on Thursday night. Which that's gonna be a great game. It's probably gonna be the best game of week 2, I would say, at least on paper it is. So really interesting. I'm gonna be really excited to watch that game. And then the final game I'll talk about is the game that happened last night, at least from when I'm recording this, so the Monday night game. Broncos at Seahawks. Russell Wilson's return did not go the way that he planned. They lose 17-16 to Seattle. I'll talk Seattle first and then Denver just because Seattle, I've been saying it, they're one of the worst teams in the league. They are. The fact that they won this game, if they were playing a different team than the Broncos, like then Russell Wilson's return, would they have looked this good? I don't think so. I think, you definitely get amped up to play. He's coming back for his, reunion game, revenge game, potentially, whatever you want to call it. But he's coming back to Seattle. You get amped up, you get more excited. You want to beat him. You want to beat him at home as well. You want to prove, even though obviously Russell Wilson's better than any quarterback on the Seahawks and Geno Smith or Drew Lock, you want to prove that, we don't need this guy on our team. We could still win games without him. So I think that really helped them, to be honest, because they're not as good as the Broncos. They're not. And the Broncos, I have them as the 4th best team in the AFC West, but they're obviously better than Seattle. I think, they fumble twice at the 1-yard line. If you don't fumble twice at the 1-yard line, you're at minimum getting 10 points. Because let's say you punch one in, you get a field goal on another one. That's a minimum 10 points right there. So, it's, a lot of things happened in that game. Geno Smith played amazing in that game, which you're not going to expect every single week. The running game for Seattle looked really good. I think their offensive line played really well. When you have Bradley Chubb and Randy Gregory coming at you, and you have a rookie left tackle in Charles Cross, getting Bradley Chubb. Now, Chubb got him a little bit towards the end, but for most of that game, he was getting shut down. You didn't even hear Bradley Chubb's name until I think it was the end of the 3rd quarter or beginning of the 4th quarter that you started hearing his name. So, really good job from a rookie left tackle on a guy who has the potential to be one of the better pass rushers, but for some reason he kind of just can't put it all together the last couple seasons. Injuries are a factor, but it was just, it was one of those things where it's Wilson, they're rather going to blow the Seahawks out, or it's going to be like this, where it's going to come down to the wire, and, probably the worst, weirdest, I don't even know what to call it, coaching decision that we've seen in a long time. Nathaniel Hackett, first game as head coach of the Broncos. Again, Seattle's up 17-16. Denver gets the ball back. I'll get the exact time just to make sure. But Denver gets the ball back with 4 minutes and 2 seconds left on the clock. Obviously, this is Russell Wilson's game. This is exactly what he wants. He wants the ball down, driving on a final drive to get points to win the game. That's exactly what he does. He, see all those stats of passing touchdowns in the 4th quarter, game-winning drives, all that. At the top of that list is always Russell Wilson, because that's just what he does. Some quarterbacks are like that, and that's exactly who he is. They get all the way to Denver's 45-yard line. So actually, let's start with this. They're at the Denver 49, so basically midfield. 1st and 10 with 1 minute 24 seconds left. They kind of go with like a screen, little flip play to Javonte Williams. He gets hit for -4 yards. Seattle actually had to call a timeout because of an injury. So Denver has all three timeouts at this time. So they kind of get saved, to be honest, by that happening, because they didn't have to waste one right there. And then after that, so we're second and 14. Then they go incompletion. So a minute and 11 seconds left, third and 14. Then they go with trying to go deep to try and obviously get a first down. You're third and 14, but they kind of do like a little, just like dump to the flat to Javonte Williams. Makes a great move, gets by, a guy who's probably a yard or 2 yards after the line of scrimmage. So if he did get stopped there, then it would have been a really long field goal, or you obviously would just have to go for it at that point. It would have been too long, but he gets 9 yards, gets all the way up to Seattle, the Seattle side of the field, of the 46-yard line. And like I said, there was a minute and 11 seconds left when that play started. It probably took, I don't know, 7 seconds or 5 seconds, whatever the time frame of. It was like under 10 seconds for that play to end. Still for their timeouts, decided not to call a timeout, decided to huddle up, call a play, go to the line of scrimmage. All the time just keeps ticking and ticking. And then finally, with 1 second left on the play clock, they call timeout. There's 20 seconds left on the clock. And when I was watching the game live, I didn't really understand what they were doing, because I didn't understand why they weren't calling timeout right away. If you like, you would rather, even if no matter what decision you're ready to come up with, you'd rather have the time. I mean, I guess the thing that watching it live, we didn't know that they were going to kick a field goal and they weren't going to go for it. Again, 4th and 5, and you're Russell Wilson. But they decided to go for a field goal. And we didn't know that obviously live, because we didn't know the plays. But I just didn't really understand why. I didn't really understand why they had to go field goal there. It was a 64-yard attempt, which he almost made. He did almost make it, but 4th and 5 with Russell Wilson, who you just paid $200 million to be your quarterback. You traded for him. I mean, it's tough not to trust him in that situation, especially like, then again, that's Russell Wilson. Give him the ball in dire situations with his back against the wall. He's going to make a play happen. To not give him the ball at that, it was just a really weird decision, a really bad decision. And you didn't use any of your timeouts at that whole drive, and then you finally use it there, and then you kick the field goal, you miss it, and then as they're kneeling, you use your timeouts, even though you only have 2, so it wouldn't even matter anyway. So you're just trying to extend the game, I don't know what he was trying to do. So it was just really weird. I just couldn't wrap my mind around what was going on. Look, if you made up your mind and you want to go with the field goal the whole time, sure, you go with your gut, but at the same time, it's 64 yards away. If it's 55 yards away, I can understand it, but 64 yards away, and I know he's a big leg, McManus, but that's a crazy amount. Especially, would you rather do that or a 4th and 5 with Russell Wilson? I'd rather do 4th and 5, and you still have your timeouts, so, and again, you had a minute left on the clock. You had so much time left when you could have called that timeout after the 9-yard gain. So they obviously lose the game. That's just, again, a bad loss. A couple bad losses week 1. That was one of them. Only scored 16 points against Seattle. Again, fumble twice at the 1-yard line. Go 0 for 3 in the red zone. Really bad from them, especially with the talent that they have on that team. Like I said, I think they're 4th in that division, maybe for reasons like this. But, the talent on that team, the quarterback that you do have, you got to win that game. And, yeah, like I said, that's just a bad loss to start week 1 off. But, that wraps week 1 up. Again, that was the last game. There's a couple games I didn't really mention. Maybe you want to say Browns beat the Panthers, last second field goal, great kick. That was a great ending. That was a good one. But other than that, there weren't any more crazy games. I guess the Saints won on another game-winning field goal, but Saints-Falcons, the Falcons are a bad team. Saints really should have lost that game, to be honest. They played awful the whole game, clutched up late. I think that, I kind of like the Saints, but at the same time, if you could barely beat the Falcons and they looked really bad, I don't know how much I'm going to love you, for the rest of the season, unless, start proving stuff to me. But we'll see what happens with them. But, a really good week 1. I think you go into a week 1, you're so excited for football to start, and you get this as a week one. I think you got to be happy with it. A lot of close games, OT games, game-winning field goals, surprising victories. I think that's exactly what you want in week one. So really good week. We'll look forward to week two. Like I said, in the next episode, I'll make my 5 picks. Hoping to at least go 3-2 again. Like I say, at least go 3-2. You're always going to win every week. And we'll talk about some of the more interesting matchups of the week. And again, any news that happens, TJ Watt news or any new injuries or anything like that, we'll obviously talk about it as well. So I'll see you in the next episode. Like I said, that should be out Friday or Saturday, somewhere around there. And yeah, I'll see you then. Thanks for listening.